In the small village of Kibawe, Bukidnon Province, Philippines, the sun rose timidly between the verdant mountains, illuminating the simple wooden and metal houses. Dario Bantug, now 45 years old, woke up early as he did every day to prepare his small grocery store before the first customers arrived. His hands already showed calluses from a lifetime of hard work, but his smile remained genuine as he arranged tropical fruits at the store entrance. The years had not been kind to Dario, who struggled to support his wife Lani and their 3 children, facing financial difficulties that seemed to only increase. The dawning day was not an ordinary one for Dario, although he tried not to give it importance. It was his birthday, a date he had long since stopped celebrating due to life circumstances. While sweeping the sidewalk in front of his store, his mind wandered to childhood times, when he ran barefoot through the dusty streets of General Santos City alongside his best friend, Emmanuel, a skinny and determined boy everyone knew as Manny. The two shared dreams bigger than the poverty that surrounded them, spending hours training boxing with improvised gloves made from rags. Memories of those days brought a nostalgic smile to Dario's wrinkled face. He vividly remembered how he had supported Manny in his first fights, how they stayed up late discussing strategies, and how they promised never to forget their origins, no matter where life took them. Fate, however, had charted very different paths for the two friends. While Manny Pacquiao became a world boxing legend, accumulating titles, fame, and fortune, Dario remained in the shadows of ordinary life, watching his friend's success from afar through television screens in local bars. The last time Dario had seen Manny in person was more than 2 decades ago, a brief encounter when the boxer was still beginning his rise. Since then, their lives had followed such distant courses that Dario held no hopes that Manny would even remember him. On that birthday morning, with the weight of overdue bills and an uncertain future, Dario sighed deeply as he watched the days. First customers approach, unaware that fate had an extraordinary turn of events in store for what seemed like an ordinary day. News traveled quickly through the narrow streets of Kibawe. A group of important people was arriving in town. Luxury vehicles, unusual in that rural region, had been spotted on the main road, causing a buzz among residents. Dario, however, remained oblivious to the events, absorbed in his financial problems while calculating if he could pay the month's rent. A substantial debt to a local loan shark, taken out to pay for his youngest daughter Mayumi's medical treatment, weighed on his shoulders like a mountain. The sun was already high when a man of simple appearance entered Dario's grocery store. He wore faded jeans, a basic t-shirt, and a cap that partially shadowed his face. There was something vaguely familiar about his features, but Dario couldn't identify precisely what, attributing the sensation to the weariness of years. The stranger wandered around the small shop, examining products, asking occasional questions about the local community, how long Dario had lived there, and if he was happy with his life. Dario's responses were polite but reserved, sharing small fragments of his story. How he had moved from General Santos City 15 years ago seeking a fresh start, how he worked tirelessly to give his children a better life, and how he dreamed of being able to pay for his firstborn Ernesto's college education. During the conversation, the stranger noticed an old photograph pinned behind the counter, yellowed by time, showing 2 smiling boys with improvised boxing gloves. Dario followed the visitor's gaze and explained, with a mixture of pride and melancholy, that one of those boys was him and the other had become the great Manny Pacquiao. The man bought only a bottle of water, paid and left without saying much more, leaving Dario with a strange feeling that the encounter had something special about it. Outside the establishment, the visitor got into one of the luxury cars parked at a distance and removed his cap, revealing himself as none other than Manny Pacquiao himself. With a determined look and a nostalgic smile, Manny instructed his team to implement the plan he had carefully crafted upon discovering by chance, through a Filipino fan who had mentioned Dario in a letter, the whereabouts of his old childhood friend. The afternoon progressed slowly in the small grocery store, with few customers coming and going. Dario checked his debt notebook, making mental calculations that always resulted in the same discouraging conclusion. His thoughts were interrupted by the arrival of his wife Lani, who entered the store hurriedly with a worried expression. The landlord had made another visit to their home, threatening eviction if the overdue rent wasn't paid by the end of the week. The news didn't stop there. Mayumi's school was demanding payment of outstanding fees, and the girl's medical treatment needed to continue. While the couple discussed their limited options, a group of well-dressed people began entering the store, examining the products with interest. Among them, an elegant woman who introduced herself as the personal assistant of a businessman who was considering investing in small local businesses. She asked several questions about the grocery store, about the challenges faced by merchants in the region, and about Dario's personal history. With politeness but without much hope, Dario shared his difficulties, mentioning in passing that, ironically, he was turning 45 that day. Upon hearing about the birthday, the woman smiled gently and said she needed to make a call. Minutes later, more vehicles stopped in front of the store, and teams began unloading boxes of food, drinks, and decorations. Dario and Larni watched in confusion as their small grocery store was quickly transformed. A film crew positioned themselves, discreetly, adjusting cameras and lights while more people arrived, including local residents who seemed equally intrigued by the unusual movement. Before Dario could understand what was happening, his complete family arrived. His children, Ernesto, Isabella, and little Mayumi, were brought by surprise, all dressed in new clothes. The grocery store owner tried to get explanations, but everyone just smiled mysteriously, asking him to be patient. Dario's heart raced when he recognized among the newcomers some faces from his childhood in General Santos City. Old friends he hadn't seen in decades, brought especially for that still inexplicable occasion unfolding in his modest establishment. The buzz grew inside and around the small grocery store. News that something extraordinary was happening at Dario's establishment attracted more and more curious residents. A bountiful table with typical Filipino foods was set up in the center of the store, whose shelves had been reorganized to make space. Colorful banners with happy birthday messages were hung, and local musicians began playing traditional melodies. Dario, still confused, was led to a specially decorated chair, while his family positioned themselves at his side. The assistant who had initially approached Dario asked for everyone's attention and began to narrate, to the birthday boy's surprise, stories from his childhood in General Santos City. Details that only someone very close could know were shared. How Dario used to share his only bread with his poorer friend, how he had lent his shoes to Manny for an important youth tournament, how he had spent sleepless nights caring for his friend after painful defeats. For each story told, there was an old acquaintance in the audience nodding, confirming the truthfulness of the accounts that highlighted the generosity and loyalty of the simple man who now listened to his own story with teary eyes. The lights suddenly went out, and a video began to be projected on the white wall of the grocery store. They were old images, digitized from VHS tapes, showing two boys training boxing, sharing simple meals, swearing eternal friendship. Dario immediately recognized himself alongside Manny, in recordings he didn't even know existed, preserved by some mutual friend over all those years. The images advanced in time, showing fragments of Pacquiao's meteoric rise, interspersed with moments when the champion, in interviews, mentioned a special childhood friend whose support had been fundamental. In the early steps of his career, emotion took over the environment when the video ended with a personal message recorded by Manny, in which the boxer revealed that he had never forgotten Dario, that he had always looked for him unsuccessfully after his move to Kibawe, and that he had finally found him. The projection ended with Manny saying that great friends remain in the heart even when separated by time and distance. At that moment, all eyes turned to the grocery store entrance, where a figure known worldwide emerged, no longer disguised, but in all his authenticity, Manny Pacquiao in person, carrying a birthday cake and with a smile that reflected decades of genuine friendship. Time seemed to freeze when Dario saw his old childhood friend approaching. The famous boxer, admired by millions, walked toward him not as a celebrity, but as the same Manny from decades ago. Their eyes met, loaded with shared memories, youthful dreams and the weight of the years that had separated them. Dario rose trembling, unable to believe that this was real and not an elaborate fantasy born of his nostalgia. When Manny placed the cake on the table and opened his arms, Dario didn't hesitate. He advanced for a hug that instantly dissolved 2 decades of separation. Tears flowed freely down Dario's wrinkled face as the two friends remained embraced, oblivious for a moment to the camera flashes and the emotional gazes surrounding them. No words were needed to express what they felt. Manny gently pulled away, and with deep respect, personally served the first piece of cake to his birthday friend. The simplicity of the gesture, coming from one of the world's greatest sports stars, deeply touched everyone present. The celebration took on a life of its own, with stories being shared, laughter echoing off the walls of the small grocery store, and traditional Filipino music accompanying the unlikely meeting. Manny introduced his own family to Dario and watched attentively as he met his friend's children. He talked at length with little Mayumi, taking an interest in her medical condition, asking detailed questions about the treatment the girl needed. Although Lani tried to minimize the gravity of the situation out of pride, Manny perceived between the lines the difficulties the family faced. In a calmer moment of the festivities, Manny led Dario to a private conversation in a corner of the store. There, away from curious eyes, the champion confessed how much he had missed Dario's sincere and disinterested friendship, especially in the loneliest moments of his fame. He told how he had tried to locate him several times over the years, always unsuccessfully, and how it was through a coincidence. A fan letter mentioning an old friend of the boxer who ran a grocery store in Kibawe that he had finally managed to reunite with his childhood companion. What Dario didn't know was that, while they talked, Manny's team was preparing the second part of the surprise, something that would forever change the life of the birthday boy and his family. While the party continued cheerfully with stories and laughter filling the small grocery store, a new movement began outside. Trucks parked on the narrow street, and efficient workers began unloading equipment, construction materials, and new furniture. Local residents watched curiously, forming small groups that commented on the extraordinary change in their neighbor's fortune. Inside the store, unaware of what was happening on the street, Dario shared with Manny his frustrated dreams, such as the desire to expand the grocery store, to be able to pay for Ernesto's medical school, and mainly to ensure complete treatment for Mayumi. Manny listened attentively to every word, every unrealized hope, every difficulty faced by his friend over the years. When he judged the moment opportune, the boxer signaled to his assistant, who handed him a large envelope and a set of keys. With an enigmatic expression, Manny asked everyone to leave the grocery store and follow him to the street. Confused, Dario followed his friend, only to find himself before a surprising scene. The facade of his store was being completely renovated by a team of agile workers, while others unloaded modern shelves, refrigeration systems, and a new sign that said, Manny Pacquiao Market. With teary eyes, Manny explained that this was only part of the gift. He led the astonished family to a small convoy of cars waiting for them and asked them to follow him for a few blocks. The improvised procession traveled the streets of Kibawe, attracting glances and comments, until stopping in front of a new, spacious, and completely furnished house. Manny handed the keys to Dario, explaining that the property was in his name, free of mortgages or debts. The boxer removed from the large envelope a set of documents, property titles for the house and the renovated grocery store, papers cancelling, all the family's pending debts, and an educational fund for Dario's 3 children, ensuring their academic future. Dario's legs weakened, and he needed to lean on Manny to avoid falling. Lani covered her face with her hands, unable to contain the tears of joy and disbelief. The children ran through the new house, exploring the rooms, the modern kitchen, the backyard garden. But the boxer hadn't finished his surprises. With a more serious countenance, Manny presented the last document, a formal commitment that all of Mayumi's medical costs would be covered for the rest of her life, including specialized treatments abroad, if necessary. When explaining that he had already arranged a consultation with the best specialists in Manila for the following week, the world champion saw something that was worth more than all his belts: the look of pure gratitude and renewed hope in the eyes of his childhood friend. The following days passed like a dream for the Bantug family. The grocery store was completely remodeled and restocked, transforming into the most modern establishment in Kibawe. Employees were hired and trained, management systems implemented, and a business strategy developed by professional consultants. Dario, although still the owner of the enterprise, now had a team that would allow him to manage the business without the physical wear of previous years. The partnership with Manny was not just nominal. The boxer ensured that exclusive products from his own line of organic foods were available only at his friend's store, attracting customers from neighboring towns. The new house quickly became a home. Lani, freed from the financial worries that consumed her, recovered the sparkle in her eyes and the energy that characterized her in her youth. The older children, Ernesto and Isabella, received the news that their enrollments at prestigious universities in Manila were guaranteed, along with accommodations and all expenses covered. As for little Mayumi, the transformation was the most significant. After consultations with specialists brought personally by Manny, an advanced treatment began that promised results that previously seemed impossible. The girl, who rarely smiled due to constant pain, now animatedly planned her future, talking about becoming a doctor to help other children. Manny remained in Kibawe for a few days, enjoying every moment with his rediscovered friend, away from the spotlight and public demands that normally surrounded him. On quiet nights, sitting on the porch of the new house, the two remembered childhood. Times shared experiences from the decades apart and built new memories. The boxer confessed to Dario that, despite all the fame and fortune he had conquered, he missed the simplicity and sincerity of the relationships of his youth. He explained how people often approached him out of interest, how difficult it was to distinguish true friendships from opportunism, and how the reunion with Dario represented a return to his most authentic roots. Before leaving, Manny organized a small ceremony for the official inauguration of the Manny Pacquiao market, attracting local authorities, press, and hundreds of residents. In his speech, he moved everyone by telling how Dario, still a boy, had shared his only meal of the day with him in times of extreme poverty, how he had encouraged him not to give up after painful defeats, and how that genuine friendship had shaped his values forever. The famous boxer publicly declared that his success would never have been possible without the unconditional support of people like Dario, and that true wealth was not in material goods, but in the ability to repay the good received. At the end, he announced the creation of a foundation in the name of Dario and Mayumi, dedicated to helping sick children from needy families throughout the region, ensuring that his friend's spirit of generosity would perpetuate beyond that small town. The months that followed brought profound changes, not only for the Manny family, but for the entire Kibawe community. The Manny Pacquiao market became more than just a commercial establishment. It transformed into a community center where people gathered, stories were shared, and mutual support was offered. Following the example of Dario and Manny, local residents began organizing initiatives to help those most in need, promoting a wave of solidarity that spread throughout the region. The Manny Pacquiao Foundation grew rapidly, attracting donations from Filipino businessmen inspired by the story of the two friends, and soon was serving hundreds of children with special medical needs. Mayumi, after months of specialized treatment, showed progress that doctors classified as remarkable. Her gradual recovery was closely followed not only by her family but by Manny, who even from a distance with his global schedule of commitments, called regularly and sent specialists for periodic evaluations. The girl had become the living symbol of the impact that a true friendship could have, extending across generations and transforming lives beyond those directly involved. Her story inspired other families facing similar challenges, bringing hope where before there was only resignation. Dario, now managing his prosperous business with the wisdom acquired in years of difficulties, made a point of keeping the memory of his own journey alive. In a special corner of the market, he set up a small museum with old photographs, the improvised boxing gloves that he and Manny used in childhood, and newspaper clippings documenting both his friend's extraordinary career and the emotional reunion that had changed his life. For every customer who showed interest, Dario told his story, not to exalt the change in his fortune, but to emphasize the message that acts of kindness, even seemingly insignificant ones, could return in unexpected and magnificent ways. On quiet nights when the family gathered on the porch of their comfortable home, Dario often contemplated the stars with a deep feeling of gratitude, not just for the material turn in his life, which had guaranteed comfort and security for his family, but mainly for the reaffirmation of values he had always believed in. That true friendship transcends time, distance, and circumstances. That sincere generosity is never a lost investment, and that the true meaning of wealth lies in the ability to positively impact the lives of others. The reunion with Manny had not only transformed his present reality, but had validated every choice of kindness he had made throughout a life of simplicity and integrity, proving that, even in a world often driven by interests, there was still room for genuine and lasting human connections. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to leave your like and subscribe to our channel.